Dr. Lincoln Kay from the Northwest University Center for Geopolitical Security argues that a more efficient, cost-effective and targeted alternative would be preferable to establishing yet another commission of inquiry. As you can tell, he joins us now for a little bit more. Dr. Cave, good morning. Thank you so much for the time. Just let's talk about why at this point we're so, we understand it. We're exhausted of these inquiries. It doesn't feel like they've actually brought on much then, although we did have this past week then just one person actually being sentenced to, I think it's 5 years in jail then, Mr. Yaqub, I think at the time. But why do we need an alternative to this? Is there any other way we could be doing this correctly?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity and good morning to your viewers. I think the fundamental issue that my article is raising is, we are, and we acknowledge that as citizens, as all stakeholders, that we are a constitutional democracy. So fundamental and aligned thereto is that through that process, democratic governance arrangements were put in place. If we look at it and we dovetail it with what the institutional or departmental legislation mandates, the political head as well as the institutional head, there's accountability to those institutions, portfolio committees and standing committees that have a responsibility to deal with democratic oversight and hold those in those leadership positions accountable.
So you reckon we shouldn't actually be having an inquiry, we should just be having the oversight committee that is supposed to be in charge of police just ultimately be looking into this, and they should be able to decide. The problem, and some may ask, is that, well, they don't have any judicial services at that point, and it may not be impartial, considering that it is part of the government that is actually being investigated at the same time here.
I think the challenge has really evolved to where the norms and values, the normative standards has really been applied not in a consistent manner as the Constitution prescribed. Because for me, if one look at the article, I could, for example, have just given the introductory paragraph and say, see sections 198 and 199 relating to the security clusters in terms of what is the expectation for all involved in the value chain. And that is paramount. Now, if trust has really been diluted to the point that we say then those established democratic oversight structures that has to fulfill their role and be seen to be really effective and efficient are not, then it means then we need to debate this issue and ask then where to. Now, the judiciary comes later. So if we look at it from an ethical perspective, how do we deal with it up to the point that we can say we have exhausted the decisions or recommendations made by these oversight bodies, states then that there is a case to be made that needs to go to our courts. So we cannot preempt the outcome. The mere fact that we have those institutions, they have to fulfill their role. And I think one needs to acknowledge that what the Speaker of Parliament did to take that action and say, these are the entities that will. Now, obviously, one cannot discard the fact that we have our executive head, which is our president of the country. He maybe looks at things at a different vantage point because he has others that support him to make that decision and hopefully informed decisions. And that it's not only about the legalistic aspect of it, but have all of the aspects been looked at holistically to be able to say that, is there fairness and transparency in processes? So it's for that reason that my article alludes to and emphasizes the point, give those entities the responsibility and role that they need to fulfill. Because ultimately, we get back then to the debate to say that if it has been so tarnished, the call becomes that much more louder for an independent anti-corruption body that is supposed to be impartial, independent, transparent, and have both those responsibilities of investigating and also make sure that the decisions taken becomes binding, and then they can pursue that.
Yeah, one might say that ever since we didn't have the Scorpions, we perhaps lost a fair bit of that. And I mean, I know we've brought the Hawks on, but it feels like the mandate has perhaps completely changed in that regard. Could accountability with regards to this inquiry, so this inquiry does happen and people do ultimately go to jail, it's speedy and the process works out. And yes, we don't have great examples of that, but if this were to be that change where we actually do see things actually happen quite quickly, would that restore the trust, not only in the president, not only in his government, but also in inquiries for the country?
The question can be answered in various ways. And for me, the important thing is we need to press the reset button or the pause button and go back to the basics. And that is really the gist of it. Why have we as an institution, our constitutional democracy, established these with clear defined normative attributes assigned to each and every the political head as well as the institutional leaders? Because the problem is, even if this commission, we have a track record of so many, and I've highlighted in the actual article, and I've tabulated it. If you look at the security cluster, there were so many that work has not been completed, that it has not reached its finality. And I think a lot of those experts, you had some of them this morning as well, that spoke to the issue of, the problem is not only the political will to a degree, but it's also how do you converge and make sure that the divergence becomes closer in terms of what are those issues that inform the fundamentals that inform good governance practices? Because ultimately, if we look at it, the political head of any department serves a purpose, and you can call it, you can define it also within political ethics, but he has a dual responsibility. But because he or she has been appointed to serve public interest, public good, these value standards enshrined in our constitution become sacrosanct, in my view.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. Let's just talk historically then. And I know we keep bringing up examples, but this is what we have to go on, right? We've recently, of course, had the Commission of Inquiry, then that's the Zondo Commission. Then you also have the Arms Deal Commission. And my question mark to you is something that you relay in your article then as well, speaking about achieving its goals. Do any of these commissions actually achieve their goals ultimately, or does that sort of get lost in the inquiry because we've now revealed something else, and so you ultimately forget what the whole point ultimately is, and you end up not achieving the goals that you had set out, which may be in covering the truth, ensuring accountability, rebuilding public trust, etc.?
I would say yes, looking at all the information and best practice standards that are out there. If we talk about building resilient institutions, it's paramount that it also is encapsulated in the understanding of what do we understand in terms of the role and responsibilities of leaders across the value chain. Linked to that is also what does the value set and standards define. So if these, because let's take the Matthews Commission. It was ministerial initiated to look at, and some of them was, we need to make sure that we deal with the issues of dislodging the responsibility and defining clearly the role and responsibility of the political head to that of the institutional head. We have seen that manifesting again in ensuing commissions. So it means that there was no attention to it. Now, the importance for me here is whether I be defined as institutionalist, but I look at it from an institutional integrity perspective. What makes institutions resilient and how should we build it? So those commissions are supposed to, as I've indicated in my article, correctly as you stated, it is to uncover, inform, but also hold accountable. And part of it has not been concluded. And it's not to say that, when one looks at it, it's to undermine, But it's really at the end of the day to be able to say, all of us, we have the vested interest as public servants, be it the case as the ordinary citizenry. Because ultimately, if our national security entities falter, it has dire implications for our constitutional democracy. So we have a role and responsibility not to just sit and speak about it, but really add value by coming up with solutions. It must be heard. It does not mean that the president say, okay, I take it on board, but the facts are there. And I think it speaks for themselves, those facts.
Yeah, and you know, I wanted to unravel that perhaps a little bit more, because the weakness of our institutions is one of the, or the strength of our institutions, let me put it this way, was actually the key reasons that we still maintain some sort of positive ranking when it came to the ratings agencies for a very long time. The things that have really held the crux of our country together. Have those weakened so much that I think globally we're beginning to be seen in a different light perhaps then as well? Does this play a role in that, do you think?
Well, I think the fact speaks for themselves. And you hit the nail on the head in that regard. Because, you know, we are having significant roles and responsibilities to advance the Africa agenda. And as a country, we have shown that. The ACTFA process is one example. Here we have in our backyard the G20 process. So it's significant. But our institutions is sacrosanct to that process. They must be seen to be functional. There must be confidence in them working. So it cannot be a situation where what I state in my article, for example, that there was a commenced process. The transformation in our democratic process echoed and embedded it in legislation. To be able to say that our institutions need to function to drive our national development objectives, our national interests. So if those external stakeholders look at us, then business confidence is one. Do we want in this economic situation, you know, still to be able to say that we're doing right in order to make sure that investment we attract, we keep it here, we deal with our socioeconomic challenges, because ultimately public service role is to add value to that.
And one wonders whether we can continue to add value by raising these commissions of inquiry, and the length of time that they sometimes take can ultimately be the laborious part too.
No, definitely. You know, maybe, you know, I cannot think for the president. I think as a political leader and the head of our country, he would obviously have looked at it from all the vantage points. He'll be able to say why he took that decision. To say that because it means that he follows the constitutional prescript that gives him the prerogative, which he has. But you know, if you have to reason it as I did in terms of the optics, from an ethical perspective, what happens then to the other entities that have a role and purpose? Because if you look at it, for example, we deal with crime intelligence. It is a security cluster. You have the Office of the Inspector General of Intelligence. That could have been addressed there to take it up.
Yeah.
And thankfully, the process is inclusive of that key stakeholder.
Yeah. One wonders, however, just very quickly, Dr. Keva, I only have 2 seconds here on this one, but if he was to make a more firm decision, shall we call it, one that excluded inquiries, and he was to, for example, fire Minister Senzo Mkhunu, make sweeping and bold movements and changes to the Department of Police then, would that have restored confidence, or would that have taken away from, let's call it, the democratic measure in which he's also trying to govern at this point? Because that's what he'll say he was perhaps trying to do here, and not just be jury, judge, and executioner.
I think the issue here is not as such of just get rid of someone, because you can't. You need to follow due process. The president is quite aware of that. But the issue of expediency versus due process also comes into the debate. And if we look at our past history, we had the former National Commissioner who became our police minister, who took 7 years to go and clear his name in a court of law. So I think the investigation processes internally, even our oversight, must be able to be validating these issues so that when it is ventilated, it should not be a case of they are found wanting as well. And I think the resources are there. I think the opportunity is there still to address it in a manner. But in the event that we have this parallel process, I think ultimately, whether the national commissioner goes or the minister, we still need to deal with this, the institutions.
Yes.
We still need to make sure that they're functional. And we still need to make sure that good governance happens in all respect, in all spheres, so that the value contribution are seen by our citizenry.
Indeed. Dr. Lincoln Cave, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much
Thank you very much
what is an astute sort of understanding of the situation then and sharing then as well. Appreciate your time, Dr. Lincoln Cave from the Northwest University Center for Geopolitical Security and Strategy.
What do you do when one of your top provincial police officials accuses the system itself of corruption? Well, if you're President Cyril Ramaphosa, you announce a commission of inquiry. But not everyone's impressed. In fact, some members of parliament think it's a waste of time and money. KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi dropped a bombshell recently, alleging serious graft within the South African Police Service. These aren't vague statements. He's been vocal, clear, and firm about corruption deeply rooted in law enforcement structures. The president's response: set up yet another commission of inquiry to investigate the claims. But this move has sparked a firestorm of criticism from inside Parliament itself. Last week, members of the portfolio committees on police and justice sat down to figure out where Parliament goes from here. And let's just say, there wasn't much enthusiasm for another drawn-out investigation. Several MPs voiced their dissatisfaction, citing a long, frustrating history of commissions that deliver thick reports, and little else. One megapixel put it bluntly: people have lost faith in commissions. They cost millions, take months, sometimes years, and very rarely lead to any real consequences. South Africans have heard this tune before. From the Marikana Commission to the State Capture Inquiry, the pattern is familiar. Endless hearings, damning findings, and then, silence. And this is where Dr. Lincoln Cave from Northwest University's Center for Geopolitical Security comes in. According to Dr. Cave, there are far better options than launching another commission. He argues that what's really needed is a more efficient, cost-effective, and targeted intervention. Something surgical, not theatrical. He proposes that independent forensic auditing units, or a specially appointed judicial task force, could do the job faster and with more credibility. These alternatives, he suggests, wouldn't just be quicker, they'd be trusted more by the public. Because right now, the commission route feels more like a public relations exercise than a genuine attempt to root out corruption. But here's the catch: commissions, while flawed, are legal tools available to the president that offer transparency. They're public, they're formal, and they often buy political time. Whether that's good or bad depends on where you're standing. Some analysts believe Ramaphosa is trying to walk a fine line, responding to serious allegations without directly rocking the political boat. Appointing a commission lets him appear responsive, without pointing fingers too quickly. But the risk is clear: if this commission drags on with no real outcome, it could damage public confidence even further. As it stands, the SAPS is facing a trust crisis. If the very institution meant to uphold the law is perceived to be corrupt, and the investigations into that corruption are seen as ineffective, what does that say to the public? South Africans are not asking for another thick report. They're asking for accountability, for arrests, for change. Whether this commission delivers on any of that remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: time is running out for talk shops. The people want action. And if the government continues to rely on mechanisms that have failed before, it may soon find that public patience has completely run out.